A few points, mainly on those two areas of street works, and then also, well, not so much the EV, but on energy. Start on the energy thing. I think what we've just looking at what has been, what has passed through the SSHR panel. It's been a little bit fragmented, and that's partly because we spent a lot of time on Croydon and safety correctly last year. But just so board members know, and there are there's a lot going on, and my sense is that there's sort of an acceleration within Commissioner, your executives as well, in terms of this, because it's actually, there's energy and EV charging and a bunch of things to do with sustainability as well that we haven't pushed as hard from that panel. But I would hope that I'd hand that over over the next couple of months. In terms of street works, I also look at, I'm very struck by this figure of 19% safety failure rate from the 2000 statutory inspections of roadworks. And that feels, and 1,128 fixed penalty notices. I think I don't know the extent to which it's related to this issue of BT, and I think we should be very clear, the shaming of BT for this behaviour has to continue until it stops. But from a safety perspective and a Vision Zero perspective, 20% non-compliance is huge. And I would be expecting more resources. Maybe I should phrase it as a question. Should we be expecting more resources on inspection and compliance efforts? Partly, which should be self-funding, given that there are penalty notices and so on. I don't know if we get that money. I hope so. But I would really hope that there would be more until that compliance rate is much, much higher. Val, you talked about evidence base for the Vision Zero or the safety work. Do we know whether these, to what extent are injuries, deaths, KSIs in surface, to what extent might they, or are they, or to what extent are they connected to improperly signposted or carried out street works? Do we have that data? Because if not, I think we should get it, because my suspicion is that there's quite a lot of that's one of the factors. Speed, I'm not saying speed isn't, but street works incorrectly carried out, I'm sure, is another. And then finally, if I might, just on the Croydon and the response to the RAIB, there is, I commend again the executives for the following up, implementing the RAIB recommendations, etc., etc. But I do want to just raise one thing which really did bother me a lot as chair of the SSHR, which was, and it's come up in, I think, mayoral questions, or maybe commissioners' questions, which is, there was this fatigue audit, IA 17780, which was carried out in summer last year, and we were initially told it didn't raise any issues of concern. When we saw it, my view, certainly it wasn't the panel's official view, but my view was that it raised quite considerable issues of concern. And we were told then at subsequent, it was mentioned, it was discussed at 3 separate SSHR meetings, and each time it was confirmed that that audit had been passed on to all of the 5 investigations and reports being written about Croydon. And I was actually genuinely shocked to find then that had not actually happened. And we have ongoing, it now has, in February it went to all the remaining open investigations. And we were told it was an administrative error that it hadn't, but it's such a material piece of information relating to not just a past incident, but a driver who is still under investigation for potentially a criminal behaviour, a criminal contribution. I can't understand how we could have omitted. I'd like to understand, I do want to understand more about how we could have omitted to send this audit to the relevant inquiries. And I don't know whether you want to comment now or whether we should do this, sort of offline, and it may be something that audit wants to look at. It's such a failure.
It's a procedural question rather than the substantive point about the drivers. So I think we can.
No. It's not about the point is how did we not provide this information?
No. Sorry, yes. My point is it's proper to ask the question, I think, because you're asking a procedural question rather than a question of.
I'm making no comment on what was in the report or anything. Just how could that? I would like to know how that could have happened.
Exactly. That's a proper question to raise. Michael, is that it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's do with Michael's two separate issues on street prosecutions and the issue around Croydon. That's okay.
Yeah. So on the Gareth, do you want to say anything more about the street works and the issue about how we monitor that? Because I think it's it's a reasonable question around how we sort of up our intelligence around, which is the substance of your point, I think.
Yeah, I mean it's a well-made point and something that we are very focused on, and increasingly so, and hence why highlighting it as part of the Commission's report. I think it's really important that anyone who's undertaking works on our roads, or indeed on the borough's roads, are complying with the standards that are set, particularly as we are doing an awful lot of work to protect vulnerable road users, to protect all different types of users, and these roadworks, they can get in the way of cycling facilities, they can affect pedestrian crossings, they can affect traffic management in the generalised sense. So we've been actually conducting many more inspections over the course of the last year. We've got a dedicated team of officers who go out and can assess and so on, and we're looking to do more because absolutely, as you say, we want to drive that compliance rate up. We don't want to have these levels of defects found, and indeed, as Tally knows, we've been having all sorts of discussions on compliance with things like temporary ramps, so that disabled people in wheelchairs can get on and off raised curbs during the times where the normal drop curbs are not available because of roadworks at junctions and so on, and we're having a big push on those. So you're absolutely right to raise it, and it is a big focus for us, and I hope to see this compliance rate increase over time.
And can we, as Mike said, can we sort of do some work about those incidents that are caused by street works in relation to the death/serious injuries?
Yes, absolutely. We can do some analysis on that.
I think on the other point around this report, I mean, I'll ask Gareth to comment with the caveat that he wasn't actually the managing director of surface transport at the time. So just to make that clear. So and I think Gareth, in commenting, if I may, it might be worth just reminding board members or informing board members around the ongoing auditing of fatigue management that we have now in place for all the procured operations that we have across the network beyond just the tram. So perhaps if you could just add that point to the...
Yeah, so specifically, Michael, in relation to that, for everyone's knowledge, that was a review that we asked to be carried out, not directly as a result of the Sandilands incident itself, but in relation to a subsequent incident that was reported widely in the media, where a driver appeared to be in a fatigue condition at the controls of the tram that was stationary at the time. So we had that piece of work done. It was carried out by Howard's internal audit team, and focused on the processes that First Group have in place to manage and monitor fatigue and so on. We did that work because we wanted to understand whether there was a systemic issue within First Group, having seen this subsequent footage, and I think it was the right thing for us to do. We notified all of the ongoing investigations, which of course weren't investigating that incident, the actual incident itself at Sandilands. We notified them we were doing the work. What we didn't do was, once that report was finally signed off in the autumn of last year, we didn't send that immediately over to those investigations. Now, at that time, the RAIB and SNC Lavalin investigations were substantively complete, although not quite published, so they were right at the end of their processes. As you say, that was an error, and it was an absolute error on our behalf not to have sent a full report over to them when the work was completed and signed off. We did subsequently send it to them in February, and all of the different investigations, those that are ongoing and those that are concluded, now have the benefit of that. As Mike says, we've instigated a programme of audits for all of our contractors who operate services for us to check that they have the right standards and processes in place. And we're leading a piece of work to really raise the understanding across the industry about the impact of fatigue and about how the industry itself can move forward with better processes to support those who are working very hard to keep the services running, and of course those are in their nature tiring jobs, and of course there are issues outside of work and inside of work that can affect whether one is fatigued in these roles. So it's a very big issue for us to address. It was an absolute genuine error on behalf of our team not to send that over at the time, and something that will ensure won't be repeated.
Is that okay, Michael?
I mean, probably I should follow up offline, because I'm still concerned. That all sounds fine, but nevertheless, there was 3 times the panel was told it had been sent to the inquiries, and it had not. And I'm very, it's very hard to do the job of the board, member in that situation, and I'm left with unanswered questions about how that could happen, if I'm honest. But I don't want to, that we could spend, we don't.
So Mike, can I ask you to offline just answer, but also I'm keen to know the reasons why as well. On the 3 occasions they asked and were told it had, not for now, but for as well.
I think it's something you've got to get. You've got to have a process to make sure that what happened, why. It's pretty. This is a grave situation around Croydon. So
Thanks for raising that, Michael. Nelson.
Mr. Chairman, if I can have the privilege.